Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Thomas from Tom CM Talk, and today I want to cover the advanced answer on the very basic and simple question, what is Salesforce? Alright, let's dive into it, and here we go. So in my basic video I already covered with you together Salesforce is a software as a service SaaS customer relation management system, CRM, with a subscription-based license model. And that answer is actually good to go for 99.99 people out there, and it's 100% accurate and correct, and it's great. However, if you an architect, developer, admin, consultant, or you planning to become a consultant, architect, developer, or admin, you should know a little bit more about Salesforce and understand that Salesforce is not just software as a service with a subscription-based license model. Because what does this mean from a technical perspective, from an architecture perspective? What are the benefits of a setup? And are there any limitations? Limitations in Salesforce? Oh, yes, Salesforce has limitations. I also sometimes tend, if someone asks me like, hey Thomas, can we do this in Salesforce, to tend to say, yeah, of course you can do it. Or yes, of course we can do it because Salesforce can do everything, which is not correct. Salesforce cannot do everything, right? So there are limitations, but you get there. To understand Salesforce and what Salesforce is actually is and how it's working and the limitations and everything, we should have a quick look into cloud computing, into the basics of cloud computing. And here we have the 4 basic cloud computing models actually out there. So first is the private cloud. Okay, that means actually you're responsible for everything. You're responsible for the network, for the storage, for the US servers running, apps, data access, everything. If networking is not good, it's your headache. If you're running out of storage, it's your headache. If your OS is crashing, it's your headache. But also everything is under your control, so you pretty much can do whatever you want. So there are still, of course, companies out there who are running a private cloud for good reasons, but it can be also in the private area that some people out there at their home running a private server. So that's the private cloud. When we have IaaS, which stands for Infrastructure as a Service, and here you can see already that actually networking, storage, these kind of things is not under your control anymore. So for example, Amazon or also Microsoft are good examples. They providing you a server, they're giving you a server, the storage and everything, and then you can do whatever you want on that server. Yeah, you can install the apps, you're responsible for the OS the server is using, you're responsible for the apps, for the data access, everything. Then we have PaaS, which stands for Platform as a Service. And here you can see that actually the only thing you manage is the apps running on the server or in the cloud, let's call it cloud, and the data access. Everything else, OS, VM, runtime, networking, storage, everything else is under control of the provider. And last but not least, we have SaaS, which you already know. So you're logging in, you're responsible for the data access and who can log in and access it, and everything else is under the control of the provider. One example for SaaS, by the way, one more example to just make it clear is, for example, Gmail. You're logging into Gmail and you can start writing your emails, sorting your emails whatsoever. But for example, you cannot install additional apps, you cannot change the way Gmail works, except of a few settings you have, but you cannot make ground changes in the code or something of Gmail, right? Or for example, also Office 365 from Microsoft, that's typical SaaS. So when you're logging in and you're using PowerPoint or Excel in the cloud, it's SaaS. Salesforce is SaaS, but it is also Platform as a Service, because it also provides the cloud, the servers, the user can logging in to use the software. So when you're an end user and you're logging into Salesforce, it's SaaS. You're using the software. At the moment, you're an admin, developer, architect, consultant, and you start creating, for example, flows, writing Apex code, installing additional apps to Salesforce, whatsoever. You're actually using the Salesforce platform as a service, and you're already here on the PaaS side. This is important to know. So Salesforce is not SaaS, it's also platform as a service. They provide you a platform, and that platform, you can use the software. But you can also manipulate the software in some certain ways, right? You cannot manipulate everything here, as you can see, but at least you have a little bit more flexibility. What else should you know is Salesforce is running the MVC pattern. And that's not something they invented or just Salesforce is using. That's people, for example, who are using Java are also familiar with MVC model. What does this mean? So Salesforce, or a pattern. So Salesforce is actually saying, okay, you have a view, the user interface layer, and the view is the user interface the end user interact with. So like when you're logging in, you're creating a record and you're adding a record, whatsoever, that's all done on the view, on the user interface layer. And that can also be Lightning Web Components, that can be everything which is the user interface pretty much. Then we have the controller, the business logic layer. And that's, for example, a flow. Someone on the user side is triggering a button that triggers a flow or some automation. Could be a flow, could be something else. And that's then on the controller side, on the business logic layer. And that goes to the model, the database layer, and doing changes on the database, right? And the database layer is actually, or the model is actually represented by the schema, the structure of a Salesforce database, pretty much. Okay. So just to give you an example, I'm a user, I'm creating a record, I hit save. That's done on the user interface layer. After I hit save, then there's something going on within the business logic layer because I trigger something. That goes to the model, to the database layer, doing the changes on the database. The database layer gives it back to the controller, and the controller gives it back to the user interface layer. That's how Salesforce is actually structured. So it's using the MVC pattern. It's always good to know. So when you're talking to developers, for example, and they talking to you about MVC, you now know a little bit about it. All right, so what do we know now? Salesforce is an application, SaaS, running on a platform, but Salesforce is also a platform as a service, PaaS. The Salesforce platform was called Force.com in the past. Today it's called Lightning Platform, but it's the same. So if you're talking to people out there and they're talking about Force.com, they're talking about the platform as a service, and it's Lightning Platform today. They just renamed it. The Salesforce database is powered by Oracle, which is an interesting fact because Mark Benioff, the CEO from Salesforce, was a former Oracle employee. Now you see, circles closing. And Salesforce has two own database query languages. One is SOQL and one is SOSL, which stands for Salesforce Object Query Language or Salesforce Object Search Language. And it's using its own in-house server-side program language, Apex. You may already heard about it. And that's very similar to Java. So if you're a developer and you can code Java, you will have no problems to also start coding in Apex. It's very, very similar. All right. So let's move on. We now know it's not just a software, it's also a platform as a server. But how is this platform set up? How is this working? What is it? So the Salesforce platform is supported by what people call out there a multi-tenant cloud-based architecture. What does this mean? Salesforce does have multiple data centers all around the globe, and they group multiple customers into instances, which they called POD, point of deployment. And your organization, when you're logging into Salesforce, that is running such an instance. And you're identified with your very, very own Salesforce.com organization ID, or just org ID. People just say org ID. So you can see it here. We have a data center. On the data center, we have different points of development, PODs, and every POD has multiple orgs. To explain that a little bit better, people always use the picture of a building with multiple apartments, a huge building with multiple apartments. And that's actually pretty accurate. So data center could be the city, and this city we have multiple skyscrapers, and the skyscrapers have multiple departments. Here you go. And now we come to the limits, because to ensure, and Salesforce does secure your customers, that if they're using Salesforce, they have a good time with it, right? They don't have to expect slowness, they don't have to expect servers crashing whatsoever. They should have a good experience, and they guarantee that by what Salesforce is calling governor limits. So what is this? To ensure that on one POD, one organization is not starting to use the entire server capability, they limit it down on in multiple ways. You can imagine, let's say, for example, you're living in a house with multiple apartments, you have an elevator, and one guy in there is starting to use the elevator all the time, up and down. He's doing, for any reason, the entire time he's using the elevator and just riding up and down in the house. So no one else would be able to use the elevator. I believe not everybody would be very, very happy about that. And to ensure that this does not happen, Salesforce does restrict some certain things so that the server capabilities are still equal for everybody on this POD. That is probably the biggest advantage of this. Then it's also an advantage of costs, of course. If every customer would have his own POD, that would be very, very expensive. And it's also a matter of security. And yeah, these are definitely the benefits of this whole multi-tenant cloud-based architecture, right? By the way, let me go quickly into Salesforce directly. Hold on. Because I want to show you how you can figure out what your POD is and your organization ID. So when you're in Salesforce, all you need to do is you hit setup, you go into setup, and then you write into company and into the quick find field here, company information. You click on that, and on company information, you have two interesting values, and one is here, the instance, which is SWE42, and the Salesforce.com organization ID, org ID, which is this digit here. So this is the POD I'm running at the moment here on SWE42, might be somewhere in Sweden maybe. And this is my very, very own private organization ID. So there might be now a couple of customers out there running also Salesforce, and when they're looking into company information, they also can see SWE42, but of course they have a different ID. This is my key. This is my key to my department within this skyscraper here. That's actually how it is. All right. Okay, let's move back to the slides. I talked about limits, governor limits, and let's go a little bit through the limits Salesforce does have to ensure that every customer does have the same experience, positive experience, of course. So there are a couple, or most of the governor limits are Apex. That's maybe, for example, the number of socket queries you can run, the number of DML operations. DML stands for data manipulating language, which is pretty much updating, inserting, deleting records or other resource-intensive actions. If you have a good developer in your company, they know how to bend these governor limits, which is not illegal. It's not like that they hack the system or trick it. But for example, if you want to update 10,000 records in a row, like in one action, you cannot do this by using 10,000 DML operations, because that's not possible. There's a limitation. That would not work. However, you can. A developer knows how to do that. So they can update 10,000 records easily with one DML operation. Then we have, of course, limitations on emails. So the daily number of emails you can send from your org is limited for good reason. So you don't mass email the world. You have limitations on the API calls you can do. Reports and dashboards, yes, also here we have limitations. The number of rows, columns, widgets, that's all limited. You cannot go ahead and create a report and export your entire org, all data from your entire org to Excel. Not sure if even Excel would be able to handle this for some companies. And objects, you will just have a limit number of objects, and you just have a limit number of fields you can create per object. So this is also limited, right? And of course, there are also concurrent request limits on these, so that server capabilities are still good and running. If you're interested in all these or in more details, and I would recommend to be interested in this, I will post here some links down in the video description, so you can click on it, and then you can go a little bit more through the governor limits and other Salesforce limitations, which hopefully will give you some more information. But that should be it for now. So that would be it. What is Salesforce now from an advanced perspective? I believe from an advanced perspective, the answer would be Salesforce is a PaaS, Platform as a Service provider, offering a software as a service, customer relation management CRM system with a subscription-based license model. I think that sounds great. Most people, you probably give that as an answer, will be like, huh? But that's how it is. So if you know that, you can start talking with architects, developers, consultants, admins, and you're good to go with Salesforce. I hope you liked that video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, give it a thumbs up somewhere down there. If you like my channel, feel free to subscribe. This is completely free. It's demonetized. It's my pleasure and my fun and to do these videos for you. If you feel something is incorrect or missing, feel free to add a comment to this video. And I hope I see you then next time. And thank you for your time. Goodbye.